And, and that's not healthy for a adolescent developing brain who's trying to figure out, who am I? What's my identity? What am I going to do in life if they're feeling split?
So that can create issues with reality, right? What their real reality is. Yeah.
I've never seen it personally, but in that Glow Kids book, he talks a lot about how he treats a lot of those kids where they have full-blown psychotic-like episodes. They can't differentiate reality from the video game anymore because they're so ingrained in it so deeply. He would talk about how he'd be talking with a teen and teen would be asking him questions like where you could tell it was like, is this real life or am I still in the video game?
Right. And I don't know have you seen that movie Avatar? It came out years ago.
Yeah.
So what, the guy, he was a military person who lost both of his legs, but when he was, transforms into that avatar, into that different world, his legs are working, he's running, he's, like superhuman, and he wants to always go back into that world. He wants to leave reality, the real world, and just go live in that world. Right. So it's kind of that same phenomenon that you're describing.
Yeah. That's a good point. I haven't seen that movie in a long time, but yeah, exactly. Because life in the avatar, life in the video game is so much better. He could run. He, has all these super,
Right.
So yeah,
he's flying on dragons and all kinds of things, right?
Yeah. So when we talk about this generation and any worries I have, that's a big one that I have. And the other one I have is like with bullying and cyberbullying and being picked on. Like I know that's nothing new, but I think people underestimate how damaging that can be.
Yeah, I think cyberbullying, we didn't have phones when I was growing up, right? And their cell phones, they didn't exist, so that whole world of cyberbullying that there is now, it didn't exist. So a lot of parents don't even know how to deal with that, or they don't know how to approach that because that's not something they had to deal with.
Yeah. I remember when the internet came out, my parents got that dial up and we were all excited to share it, but
right.
You had to, turn off what you were doing so mom could make a phone call, and then you could get back on. But yeah, absolutely. Because, and I think it's all these little micro or mini traumas again, in a way where it's even the whole like thing. It's like, like people want to feel liked and they want to feel like people think positively of that. So they, make postings and they do these TikToks and Facebook posts and Instagram and all that. And if they don't get as many likes on it, then, that can be a real blow to their ego. Facebook way back in the day used to have the like or the dislike button. So you could actually thumb down people's postings, and they took that away pretty fast because that was just detrimental. And all these people get these blow to their egos because it's like, oh, no one's liking my posting, or a lot of people disliked it, and so yeah, that can be
right. So if not enough people like it, or in the past when people dislike, that affects people's self-esteem, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
definitely. So what do you think about what are ways to maneuver around cyberbullying and those kind of things? Well, what do you, as far as advice to parents, what do you tell them?
I tell a lot of parents that you can't just take away technology altogether. There's some parents who say, I know it's bad. I'm not going to give my kid a phone. I'm just not going to let him. And I say, unfortunately, we live in a society where that's not going to be realistic.
Right.
You can't just take it away. So instead, what you have to do is you have to teach a kid a healthy relationship with technology and healthy boundaries. And so it means that
just like with anything else, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like relationships with anything else. And so it's, is this relationship abusive or unhealthy for me or not? And what do you do with an unhealthy relationship? You set boundaries and put limits and things like that. So yeah, I try to help all my parents set kind of clear limits with their kids' technology. Just, setting, whether it's the screen time app that's built into the phones, or you buy external devices where, you can't use it between certain hours, like especially around sleep. I'd say the worst thing you can do is let someone have their phone in their bed.
Right.
So, you have it where the phone or the iPad or device basically shuts down from, 8 o'clock at night till 7 in the morning. Or you put limits on certain apps, like sure, let them have social media if it's not, if it's not too hard on them, but, limit it to an hour or two a day and set those limits and teach them. Because the research says, like, if we take that cocaine model, you can't expect an adolescent kid, young adult who doesn't have a fully developed prefrontal cortex to not use it excessively. It's like, it's so stimulating. It feels so good that telling them, hey, I'm going to trust you with this device. You're a good kid. That's a dangerous game, because sure, there are some kids that you can trust and they will get off of it. But more often than not, it's, they just can't help it. Right.
So I think it's really important that parents periodically assess if this, social media or phone usage is healthy or not.
Yeah.
Right? So if it's not healthy, that means that there's negative consequences arising from that use of it, right?
Yeah. 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 So in addition to, kind of limiting your kids on devices, I also say you got to have open, clear communication and relationship with your kids in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Constantly checking in with them. How you doing? How you feeling? How, have a gauge on their self-esteem if they seem like they're anxious or withdrawn or whatnot. And, that what's going on in their life. And then you have such a good relationship with them that if there is something going on, they're open and they can come to you, or you can figure it out together.
Okay.
It's like, hey, Billy, I know you've been not coming out of your room a bunch lately. You don't seem very happy. What's going on? And it's, oh, well, so-and-so online just won't leave me alone. And they're just harassing me and they're sending me these messages that are just super mean. I don't know what to do about it. It's like, okay.
But that gives you something to work with. At least you're in the know-how of, what to do right at that point, or you can develop a plan or talk more about it. But what happens with those kids? And I'm noticing this a lot more. There are a lot of kids who are just internalizing everything. They don't really speak up. You don't know what's going on in their head, right? So how do parents deal with those children?
Yeah, that happens a lot. They internalize and then someone will shut down, withdraw, get even worse, or they externalize and get grumpy, irritable, explosive. My first thing is I always say, let's try to get them into some therapy.
Okay.
Get someone else too that can help them, and maybe they'll open up with a relative stranger than their own parent about something going on in their life that they don't feel comfortable going to mom and dad for whatever reason.
Sure.
So try to get to the bottom of it through therapy, and then really focus with the kid on enhancing that relationship with them, and then figuring out with them and putting together a game plan, like you said, of like, okay, I love you. I can tell something's going on, and I want to help you figure it out. But you got to open up and let me know what it is, or
sure,
give me some sort of indication, something.
So depending upon the age, like play therapy, for example, that could be really useful for younger kids, right?
Yeah. I know a lot of play therapists will say play therapy is great for all ages. I personally am in the camp where I think it's great for kids who are like 6 years and younger, and especially when trauma is involved and language is a weakness too. So you have younger kids who don't have the insight or the verbal skills, the language to be able to really articulate it. They don't even know what's going on in their head and their heart. And so
that's a good point.
Play therapy is their language to work out, talk out through play what's going on and process it.
Because when they're playing, they're actually kind of distracted. So they will talk more, or maybe, discuss more things that are going on inside of their head because they're distracted by that. Play therapy, is that kind of the concept with it?
The way I understand it is that can be, but more so the play is their literal language. So instead of saying to you, my mommy and daddy fight a lot and my daddy beats up my mom, it's, oh, they're playing with the dollhouse and the father figure and the mother figure are fighting a lot in the play, and the mother figure is crying a lot in the closet. Does that make sense?
So, right. So the therapist is able to kind of see that visually and then kind of put two and two together to see what's going on maybe in their home.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I look at play therapy as that's the kid's language. So the therapist is watching and basically while watching the kid play is the same thing as listening to them talk. It's, what are you telling me through your play?
Right. Okay.
That's going on in your head and your heart and your life.
What about for kids maybe older than that age group?
Yeah, I'm a big proponent for like cognitive behavioral therapy, traditional talk therapy. But it kind of depends on what's going on and what is really their core struggle. My specialty is the kind of psychological testing, neuropsych evals. And so when it comes to the therapy piece, that's where I refer to a therapist. I say, hey, that's your specialty. My testing will help decide like overall what type of therapy can maybe be best. But then I turn it over to the therapist and say, okay, now this is your specialty, so I'll let you fine tune it and take it from here.
There you go. So through the testing, we're able to figure out what kind of therapy is going to be best, or if medication might be appropriate, those kind of things, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. There's that genetic predisposition in a lot of people, right? So it's not just a situational, circumstantial thing, right? So, I think those are the people, if they're, going through something situational, circumstantial, the medicine really can just be like a short-term kind of thing, right? But if it's something that's being handed down genetically from generation to generation, those are the people that I see that need more long-term kind of therapy or, treatment with medications.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Because when we do our evaluations, we're looking at that genetic family history for sure. And I always ask, like, does mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, is there an aunt, uncle, anybody who's suffered from, that of that's been diagnosed ADHD, because there's a lot of that's highly genetic.
Right. And maybe if they haven't been diagnosed, they were self-medicating, right?
Yeah.
So either they were diagnosed and they hadn't got treatment, or, they were self-medicating. So it's important to look at that factor too, with like, is there a history of addictions or, alcoholism, drug addiction, gambling, sex addictions. There's all types of different ways people self-medicate. So I think it's really important to assess that part too, because of the, stigma. Unfortunately, there's a stigma with mental health, but I think it's getting much better this day and age. But back then, people weren't talking about these kind of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And, so many times I'll be talking with a parent, they say, well, my grandpa, I swear, he was probably depressed, but now he never saw a doctor, or, back then they didn't know what it was, or, ADHD, like we didn't know what that was, 100 years ago or 50 years ago. And so, there's definitely more awareness now. But when we talk about family history, it's anybody who's been formally diagnosed, treated, anybody who you suspected, maybe they never got treated, never got diagnosed, or they were self-medicating. And so, because a lot of the conditions, like I know ADHD has a huge genetic component.
Absolutely. I think we all have challenges that, we have to overcome in life. But I think the difference is are we actually working on it, or are we finding a way, or ways to help with it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And those are the hard people, because, there's people who are struggling, and it's how do we get them in the door? How do we get them into the therapy office, to your office? And, those are the people I worry about, people that are out there that are struggling, suffering, and they don't know, that they can do anything, or they don't know where the options are, or they don't feel, confident enough or to seek out that help.
Right.
Or there's some shame involved, or some embarrassment of, I don't want to go see a shrink or something. I can.
Right. And that's exactly why I feel like psychological testing to me is the best place to start. Right. Because, you can find out what's going on with you, and you'll receive recommendations as to how to go about the treatment. And then it's up to you, right? You can choose to do it or not. It's up to you, right? So can you describe what someone should expect with the psychological testing process?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, through the process, it's basically in 3 steps. First step is what we call like an intake or clinical interview. So that's where we gather a lot of background, historical information. So if we're evaluating a child, we do that intake interview with a parent or caregiver, guardian, someone who knows, and we're going through, or if it's an adult going through the evaluation themselves, then obviously with them. And if there's parent, spouse, significant others that we can interview too, so we're gathering stuff about medical history, academic history, work history, family history, trying to get all the background, everything that led up to today. And then after that appointment, then we do the actual testing evaluation. And so we use the word tests because I guess that's ultimately what they are, but to the patient, to the client, they feel more like brain games, activities. And I kind of describe it, it's like a really long therapy session that's a little more structured.
Okay.
So we're using blocks, puzzles, pictures to check in on things like attention, concentration, their memory. And then questionnaires are talking about feeling and how do you feel about yourself and life and school, work. And then we've got, questionnaires that they, answer true, false, yes, no, maybe, sometimes, often, always to, a bunch of statements and questions. And so that appointment takes anywhere from, for a good evaluation, minimum 2-3 hours. Sometimes it can go as much as 6 hours across a couple of days.
Okay.
And then after that, the psychologist takes a week or 2 or however long they need to analyze all those results, to kind of go through every answer, every question. We score the results to get these, these scores. And then we have what we call a feedback or a follow-up appointment with the patient or the patient's family and explain all the results. Say,
right.
Okay.
So if they have any questions like, hey, I don't know about this part, then you could go into detail as to how you came to that conclusion.
Yeah, exactly. And try to give a lot of education on their diagnosis, how it can look like other ones, why it's different, highlight their strengths, talk about then ways to help with the weaknesses. Yeah, like, is medication indicated? Is therapy indicated? What are some ways you can help yourself at home? Self-help resources, things like that. Yeah, is the process from start to finish usually.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I believe that psychological testing is, invaluable. It's priceless, really, and, I really appreciate how you're helping these people with figuring out what's going on with them and then developing a plan for them, so that's great work that you're doing there.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And that's been my passion. It's like help